Hi guys, welcome back aboard good old Athena. In this week's video I will tell you the incredibly frustrating story of our Fischer Panda genset that's been broken for the last 5.5 months due to a warranty claim on a roughly $50 part and quite possibly the absolute worst customer support I have ever encountered. Also in this week's video I hope to fix an issue with our bow roller and finally paint the inside of our Companionway hatch. Our experience with Fischer Panda has led me to coin a new saying, which is friends don't let friends buy Fischer Pandas. Wise words to live by if you ask me. But to not have this video just be a bunch of yammering on, let's get the ball rolling on the DIY projects first. My name is Mess, this is my wife Ava. I've spent the last 5 years on a somewhat extensive refit of our 1987 Warrior 38 named Athena. That was a DIY fun-packed adventure complete with a very extensive osmosis treatment, building a new rudder using vacuum infusion, rebuilding the entire deck, gutting and subsequently rebuilding most of the interior, painting the top sides, and a ton of other projects. The summer of 2021 we started cruising full time. Now we're finally ready to begin our adventure. The headliner here aboard Athena isn't finished yet, which is why it looks a little wonky, for instance up here. I also still need to finish the nav station. There's a bit of an unseemly hole up here and a little gap down here, and this thing needs to be screwed in, faired and painted. But really, if you ask me, the biggest eyesore inside of Athena is the underside of our Companionway hatch. There used to be some fake leather up there covering it, but as often happens with that fake leather, that just deteriorated and started sagging, so I pulled that off. But yeah, it's not looking so great. And that is why here on our to-do board we have a task called Finish Underside of Companionway Hatch. We could go ahead and use fake leather again. I think that would be the quickest fix, but it's not really a good long-term solution, and also I don't know how easy it is to find fake leather here in Trinidad, so I think our best bet is to give it a bit of sanding, some fairing, and a lick of paint. Speaking of sanding, my much beloved and much used Bosch 150 Turbo here has developed a little bit of a backing pad issue. Sandpaper, or in this case a sanding net, doesn't seem to stick that well to the backing pad anymore. The backing pad is a wear part, but it's something that's super easy to replace. I picked up a couple of new backing pads in the US. The only downside to switching out the backing pads is the fact that they're about $50 US a piece. The backing pads seem to die a little bit quicker if you're using sanding nets rather than sandpaper, but irregardless, if you're going to be doing a lot of sanding on your boat, I highly recommend you pick up some pad savers. Whereas a new backing pad is around $50 US, you can get a pack of 2 of these for around $15. The pad saver simply just sits between the backing pad and the sandpaper, thereby protecting the backing pad. The only reason my backing pad here is in this sorry state now is because I ran out of pad savers. I've been using pad savers for years and they're super awesome. I'll include a link for the ones I ordered down in the description. With the backing pad replaced and a brand new pad saver on there, let's go ahead and pull down the hatch so we can get started on the oh glorious sanding. Athena's Companionway hatch has a couple of screws that keep the hatch from sliding into the cockpit. With those removed, the hatch slides right off. On the underside of the hatch there is a set of tracks that secure to a couple of strips of teak. Under that teak you can get a quick glimpse of the fake leather that used to be the cover on the inside of the hatch. I removed both of the tracks and then got started sanding. Sanding the surface not only gets rid of the little bit of old foam and glue residue that was left behind, but it also knocks down the texture of the fiberglass, meaning there will be less fairing required. There were a couple of old holes from hardware the previous owners had installed. I cleaned up the holes and removed the dust before moving on to applying polyester putty to the low spots and any imperfections. After a little bit of sanding and a little bit of polyester putty, this is what I'm left with. A nice, relatively smooth surface. The paint we're going to be using is very high gloss, so we're definitely going to be able to see some imperfections in the surface. but that's okay. It's the underside of a hatch. I'm not the biggest fan of one-part paints. Typically, I've had way better luck in terms of durability with two-part paints. But there is one giant upside to one-part paints, and that's the fact that the fumes coming off of them are far less eager to kill you than the fumes coming off of two-part paints. Also, I couldn't get any of my usual favorite paints in either of the two chandleries within walking distance of the boat. So yeah, for this one, we're gonna try a one-part paint. In this instance, that's gonna mean a couple of products from Epiphanes. That's gonna be their multimarine primer, and then as a top coat, their monourethane. No matter the type of coating you're applying, the devil is in the details, meaning prep is everything. I wiped down the hatch to get rid of the last bit of dust and any contaminants. After thoroughly mixing the primer and taping off the wood on the front of the hatch, I was ready to start applying primer. I'll be sanding in between the coats of primer to knock down any imperfections, so I'm not too concerned about any mistakes in the first coat. In between waiting on coats of primer to dry, why don't we get started on the next task, which is going to be this one, anchor roller. This is a definite must fix because as soon as we leave Trinidad, we're going to be living at anchor for the next 6 months. Turns out letting out 100 meters or 328 feet of chain takes a while. Good news is, since the last calibration of our chain counter, it seems to be working much better. The swiveling part of our anchor roller has some issues. As you can see here, there's some obvious damage, but also after having removed the swiveling bit, the little retention clips apparently got sheared off. As you can see, there's not a lot of room to work with here. I'll need to come up with a simple yet sturdy solution. I would love to see if I can come up with a bit of a new design for the actual swiveling part here, but it'll have to be a lot sturdier, and that is going to involve a lot of head scratching and possibly some trial and error, so now is not the time for that. As a good quality cruising fix, I think I might be able to get away with just having a much beefier and sturdier version of this up on the bow roller. The tricky part here is going to be making sure that the geometry is right so that the tip of the anchor doesn't jam into the bow of the boat or something silly like that. Now we have a Rockner 25, and one of the things I really love about Rockner is that you can download a 1:1 scale template from their website of all of their anchors. I've come up with a design I think will work. It is quite a bit beefier than this one. It is 9 centimeters, whereas the old one was 5, so that's the difference there. That's quite a lot. But I know they have access to Delvin here, so let me go drop off the design at the machine shop, and then I think we're ready for the first coat of paint. After a quick bit of sanding just to knock down any imperfections and a wipe down, we are now ready for the first coat of monourethane. I was reading the TDS, or the technical data sheet for this paint last night, and it turns out they actually recommend applying it with a brush. It's been a really long time since I've applied anything but primer with a brush, so this is going to be interesting. Fun little side note about this paint. When I purchased it, there was a power outage here, so I was fumbling around inside of the chandlery with a flashlight. I thought I had purchased white paint, but it's actually kind of a very light gray, so it'll be fine. While we're waiting for coats of paint to dry, and while I'm waiting to get the quote back on the bow roller fix, why don't I tell you the incredibly frustrating story of our Fischer Panda genset. Our genset is a Fischer Panda 5000i PMS 230 volt 50 Hz genset. Its sole purpose in life is to convert diesel into angry pixies. In this case, alternating current pixies. We're lucky in the fact that we also have 1600 watts solar and a 4 kilowatt high output alternator on our main engine. I am really glad I built in that bit of redundancy, because our $15,000 genset that is barely 2 years old has been out of commission for a little over 5 months. Around 5.5 months ago, we started seeing low voltage alarms on the display for the genset. We also started seeing low RPMs and also a bit of black smoke coming out of the exhaust. The very first thing I did was to replace the fuel filters. I replaced the air filter. I also checked our diesel, and for just good measure, I also replaced the impeller. None of that helped. I then contacted Fischer Panda in the US, because at this point in time we had just crossed the Atlantic and we were in Barbados. Over the course of a week or 2 weeks, something like that, with the help of some guys in Germany, they diagnosed the issue to be a faulty actuator. For a bit of context, it's this little black guy here, a super cheap, lightweight and easy to replace part. Upon hearing this news, I emailed Fischer Panda back saying, that sounds awesome. How do I get my hands on a new actuator? And also, I assume this is covered by warranty. It's an EU genset purchased in the EU and the product is less than 2 years old. And then nothing. A week later, I email again asking if there's any update on this matter, and again, nothing, no reply. Then another week later, I email again, and again, no reply. By this point in time, we're almost in Grenada, and I'd seen on Fischer Panda's website that there was a local dealer in Grenada, so I reached out to them. The dealer in Grenada reached out to Fischer Panda, and within a few days they got a reply back saying that yes, the part is covered by warranty. Great. So now the only issue is actually getting the part. It turns out a lot of the parts on the US gensets are completely different from the European gensets. From that point in time where Fischer Panda confirmed to the dealer in Grenada that the issue was covered by warranty, it took Fischer Panda 21 days to arrive at the conclusion that we can indeed use one of the actuators from a US genset on our European genset. During those 21 days, I and the dealer in Grenada both tried to reach Fischer Panda. I called, I emailed, I even sent Instagram messages, and nothing. No reply. No message saying, sorry, we were on it, it's taking a bit of time to figure out what to do. No updates, no replies at all, just a wall of silence. Finally, after 21 days, we got word from Fischer Panda that yes, we could indeed use one of the US actuators on our European genset, and that they were ready to ship the part to Grenada. Now, unfortunately, so much time had passed by then that Ava and I were simply just out of time. We already had flights to the US booked out of Trinidad, and we also had a date to haul out the boat here in Trinidad. So we had Fischer Panda send the part to the service partner here in Trinidad instead. Now all was well, right? It was just a matter of waiting for the part to show up. No, because 19 days later, I get an email from Fischer Panda saying, oh, sorry, we forgot to ship the part anyways. Is this address still good in Trinidad? I replied saying, yes, that's still the address of the service partner in Trinidad, and could you please provide me with the tracking number once you've shipped the package? I sent the tracking number to the service partner here in Trinidad, and remember, the part is getting shipped to the service partner, not to Ava and I here in the yard, which was actually good because so much time had passed by then that Ava and I were up with her family in Michigan. And I know that the service partner saw the message with the tracking number because he gave it a little thumbs up in WhatsApp. After about a month, I reached out to the service partner here in Trinidad just to verify that they have received the part. I never get a reply to that message, but I get sidetracked by other stuff. At this point in time, I'm busy working on the catamaran up in Charleston. So a little bit later, Ava reaches out to the service provider. Turns out they never got the part delivered, or they never picked it up from customs. They then have one of their guys go to customs on 3 occasions to try and pick up the package, but every time he gets denied by customs for having the wrong paperwork. One of the instances was my signature not matching on 2 copied forms we had given him, and then another instance was him not being able to provide a piece of paper from the yard stating that Athena was actually in the yard. Long story short, I come back to Trinidad and I go to the customs place with a guy from the service partner. We spent about 4 hours there, and what's kind of complicating matters a little bit is the fact that the package hasn't really been picked up in time. So customs has put the package on a pallet for upcoming things that are going to get auctioned off because they were unclaimed. On a fun little side note, this is the amount of paperwork required to get something out of customs here in Trinidad. It's a lot. Not only was getting the package out of customs a little bit of a hassle, but because the package hadn't been picked up in time, there was now a storage fee I had to pay to be able to get the package. That fee was roughly $50 US, which I happily paid just in the hopes of finally being able to put this nightmare behind us. But in a little bit of irony, I think $50 US will basically buy you the part if you just outright buy it. After all of that, we finally have the part. This took me 5.5 months to get. About 20 hours of my time in writing emails, messages, and going to the custom place, stuff like that. And of course, the $50 in storage fees. I am, to be honest, appalled by the customer service provided by Fischer Panda. You might think, but Matt, it's just a genset, it's no big deal. But bear with me for a second here. If you fork over the obscene amount of money they're charging for one of those gensets, it's probably because you need it. And wouldn't it then behoove you as a genset manufacturer to provide customer support in a somewhat urgent fashion so that your customers aren't left with a non-working genset for months on end, especially when we're talking about a freaking $50 part? I've said this before and I will probably say it again many times. I don't care that things, mechanical things, break, right? It's kind of their nature. It's what they do. The thing that's important here is how the manufacturer of that doohickey actually provides you with support when that happens. And to be frank, I am never going to own another Fischer Panda genset again, and I am never going to recommend anybody to buy a Fischer Panda genset again. In fact, when somebody asks me what genset they should buy, I will tell them this very story, and I will finish that story off with my new saying, friends don't let friends buy pandas. Just to be 100% clear here, I am not upset because the part broke. I mean, like I said, that happens. The reason why I'm angry and annoyed is because of the way Fischer Panda handled the situation. Their complete lack of communication and their atrocious customer support. That is why I'm never going to recommend anybody buy a Fischer Panda product. If there's somebody in your life that's teetering on joining the dark side, meaning buying a Fischer Panda product, maybe consider sending them a link to this video, or maybe consider sending them one of our new Friends Don't Let Friends Buy Pandas stickers or t-shirts. I'm hoping the sales of the stickers will help cover the cost of the storage fee and also whatever the service partner is going to charge me for all of their fumbling about with customs. Ta-da! Old actuator, new actuator. Hopefully that will fix the issues we've been having with the genset. Replacing the actuator is super simple, and to their credit, Fischer Panda actually provides a little video on their YouTube channel that describes how to do it. But yeah, before swapping in the new one, I took a photo of the bottom of it because the sticker was still on the new one, and this is what it looked like. I then looked that part up on the internet, and it turns out you can order a new one of these actuators from Amazon.com for $51.99. So yeah, if you're having issues with your Fischer Panda 5000i PMS, then maybe check out Amazon.com instead of contacting Fischer Panda. So hopefully we can now close the Fix Fischer Panda task. Now the issue we were having was kind of an intermittent issue in the sense that sometimes it would happen within a few minutes of starting the genset, and sometimes it would take maybe up to an hour or something like that. So I can't really test the genset until we can run it for a long continuous period. So we're gonna have to wait to do that until the boat is back in the water. I have an update on the anchor roller situation. I got the quote back from the machine shop. They're quoting a little over $100 to make the part, including materials and labor. I've told them to go ahead, and hopefully they'll have that ready for me in the beginning of next week, so we can go ahead and close that one too. But I should still be able to finish the underside of the Companionway hatch today. The paint job on the hatch turned out a little bit meh, but I think it's okay for the underside of a hatch. The last thing I want to do is just to give these teak strips here a little bit of a refresh, just a light sanding and then some oil, and then that will look like that. I was debating whether or not to varnish the teak strips, but every once in a while I think the track actually slides against the teak, so that's not gonna last, hence just the oiling. There are, like I mentioned, a couple of imperfections in the paint job, but with the air conditioning on here inside of the boat, that's gonna be stirring up the air a lot, and I think this is as good as I can get it. That being said, I don't think it looks horrible. It's definitely a big improvement on what we had before. I think I have a couple of photos just so you can see the before and after. I think that was definitely worth the effort. But with the companionway hatch done, we can go ahead and close this task. Now, like I mentioned, I'm gonna get the anchor roller doohickey early next week, so we'll have to wait until next week's video with that one. Speaking of next week we should also have a little bit of a better idea of when Ava is going to be rejoining the boat. She's currently up in the US, stuck a little bit because of the whole SAG strike thing. If the strike gets resolved, then she'll go with her sister to Budapest. If it doesn't, well, then she'll probably come back to Trinidad a little bit sooner. But either way, we should know a little bit more next week. And on that hopeful note, I will end this week's video here. I hope to see all of you guys back here aboard Athena next week for yet more glorious DIY fun. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, please remember to leave a like. See you!